listening to Spacevidcast 4.18 for Friday, July 8th, 2011. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham, and with me is Carrie Ann Higginbotham and Tim Bailey, internet celebrities. Woo! We are here at the Wet and Wild fun adventure that will be the final launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis. It quite literally just started raining on us once more.
Quite literally. And we do have a live audience, so if you need chairs, there are some over here.
Yeah, we've got seat
you don't
back
have to feel
here. We're actually
left out there.
So behind us, those lights that you see, that is wow.
It's
loud. Yeah. All right. So to put this into perspective,
a bug flew in my eye.
The Space Shuttle is supposed to launch this Friday, well, at 11:30 Central Time on Friday. Yeah. And you'll see right down here, I think it's like right about there. Look at that. The bottom of the banner is red as opposed to normal green. That's indicating that that is the current status. We are no-go due to weather.
As is the shirt.
As is the shirt. We were talking about that beforehand. We were going to, as soon as we went go, I'd switch in and out of red and green shirts based on our current status. But we've got a current rainbow going on. The blue Vidcast, black and red.
I like it.
Yeah, but we're
veritable rainbow.
We're currently no-go due to weather, and this is kind of how it goes. I think because this is the last launch, NASA's really going to push this down to the wire. They're going to try to go as far as they can before they absolutely have to scrub the launch. So I think we're going to see us go all the way down to T-9 and holding. And right before we're supposed to lift the clock at T-9, say, even 5 minutes after they're supposed to lift it, we're still in the window. I think they're going to push it all the way through that 5 minutes just to see if they can actually get it going.
So people have been asking me, because we're right next to the tweet up tent. I know you can't quite tell from here. It's dark. There's only a few lights behind us. But for those of you who kind of have a general idea, the clock is just like right over here. I don't know, what would you say? 100 feet or so.
Sure.
That way. But we are, one side of our tent literally just butts up right next to the tweet up tent. We're sharing a wall, essentially.
Yep. But not air conditioning.
Right.
No. Well, I'm going to lift that wall if it gets too hot in here for sure. So they have to walk right behind us in order to get into the tweet up tent. So people have been stopping and going, oh, you're Spacevidcast! Yes, hi, how are you? Meeting people, it's been really awesome. But then other people have been saying, well, so you're not really going to be broadcasting the whole time, right? You're not going to really.
And we are. That so begins.
And I said, yes, we are going to be here till we scrub.
Well, that's going to be most of the countdown, I think. We're going to be almost the entire 14 hours going through this. But, here's hoping it actually does launch because, we've got some really great press coverage going on right now. Although a lot of it's going, I guarantee you, a lot of the press coverage is going to be, this is NASA's last flight.
The end of the space program.
We're hearing
NASA's closing.
We're hearing that a lot. In fact, there was even comments on our YouTube channel. A YouTuber, I have no idea how to say that.
All right.
Help me out with that. Rock 87.
Yep, that one.
Quote is, well, what is NASA going to do? Are they going to shut down their whole operations? Been trying to find an answer to that, but never found one. So yeah, what will NASA do after Atlantis comes back? And it's interesting that they've been trying to find an answer and can't find one.
Right.
That's the sad thing, because I think a lot of people, there isn't a lot of information as to what NASA's going to do, and I think there is a lot of misinformation. So let's take a moment to talk about what the final flight of the Space Shuttle actually means for NASA.
Sure.
Well, as far as human spaceflight goes, yes, the Space Shuttle is the last time that we will have a Space Shuttle going up. And as far as a U.S. vehicle taking U.S. astronauts up to the space station, this will be the last thing that we do for a while. I mean, we've got commercial contracts out. They've got the COTS CC Dev 2 program where they're asking some of the commercial companies to do technical demonstrations. They're not paying them for services yet, but they're saying, hey, if you're interested, we'll pay for you to do these demonstration flights and actually show us that you're capable of doing these things, including taking cargo to the International Space Station or doing some demo flights later of launch aboard systems or rendezvous and docking procedures that you would use for people. So there are things coming down the pipe. But even aside from that, there's tons of other launches going on.
Absolutely. Well, actually, there's even a Delta IV launch from Cape Canaveral, from Kennedy Space Center, that could interfere with Space Shuttle Atlantis' launch. It's supposed to be after Space Shuttle Atlantis, but it could get in the way. Additionally, later this year, we've got Juno launching from here.
Later this year, it's next month. It's almost 1 month exactly from today. Here in Cape Canaveral, we're going to have the Juno launch going to Jupiter, which is super exciting, and they're doing a tweet up.
So the answer is in the short term, and when we say short term, really when you look at SpaceX and their Dragon capsule, I think they're only they're very close to being able to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. They're one flight away from their testing to say, yep, we're ready for that. Then their next step after that is going to be crew to the International Space Station. And that's an American-made rocket, designed in California, built mostly in California, shipped down to Kennedy Space Center, launched from NASA.
What were they saying yesterday, other than there's a couple of items that they had to have shipped in from another country? It's purely a USA vehicle.
Designed and built here in America. So that's an American rocket that will be launching from it'll be launching here from Kennedy Space Center. And it could be delivering NASA astronauts to the International Space Station within a couple of years. So we're not talking about a huge gap, and a lot of people may remember or at least have heard of the gap between Apollo and the Space Shuttle program, and that was pretty big. I mean, that was a large gap. We're not talking about anything like that for being able to send humans up.
Right. It's more like what we had between when we had the Challenger accident and we had the Columbia accident. They stood down for a couple of years until they could figure out what they were doing, where to make some improvements, and I think that's probably more what we're going to see is in a couple of years we'll start having crewed flights by the Dragon capsule. We've got Sierra Nevada Corporation that's talking about doing their Dream Chaser. There's a whole lot of companies that are out there.
Now, the Dream Chaser, so most of the stuff we've been talking about, the Dragon capsule, the new Orion capsule, which we haven't mentioned, but there's actually a tent for that over there. Yeah. Most of these are capsule designs, the old Apollo era design. But Dream Chaser is not.
No, it's a winged vehicle. So it was taking some of that NASA legacy that they'd been using for the X vehicles that they've been coming up with. X-34, I want to say.
Something like that.
X-35?
X-35, maybe? Anyway, anybody know?
Chat room's going to let us know.
Actually derived from a Russian design.
Derived from a Russian design, chat room says.
I did not know.
Is that from the Max design?
Sometimes it is better to have an IRL chat room. Go on.
There you go.
You should see this. But it's a lifting body design, so it's got little stubby wings on it, and it will launch on top of an Atlas V, or it could go on top of a Delta IV. And it'll launch up on an existing rocket, and it would take a small crew up, somewhere between 2 and 6, depending on how they configure it, or you could take cargo, or you could take experiments, and then it will land back on a standard runway. So it's kind of like the Space Shuttle was intended to be, with a much smaller cargo payload. It's basically a crew transport, but that same concept of a configuration.
So it's actually kind of an exciting time for NASA. Certainly, the Space Shuttle program is retiring, and it's a majestic vehicle to watch launch. There's nothing quite like it. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. But that's not the end of human spaceflight for NASA. It just means we're going to be changing how we get into space.
Thank you, Quantum. X-34, apparently.
X-34. See, I thought it was the X-35.
I was right at the beginning.
Why did I doubt you?
I don't know.
And somebody else says X-37. We'll just keep going.
Yeah, whatever.
The X vehicles all build off of each other anyways, and they do different technology development pieces. But they've built the entire pressure vessel. They're building the external pieces. I've seen pieces. I've actually been in a mock-up of Dream Chaser. It's not huge. But then again, if you get inside a mock-up of the Space Shuttle, and you see how big the mid-deck is, and you see how big the flight deck is, they're not very big either. You don't want to be a tall person inside the Space Shuttle, and I would say probably that's going to be the way that things continue on in space. It's not going to be super luxurious for quite a while.
The great thing about the commercial industry is that we had 2 disasters with the Space Shuttle, Challenger and Columbia, and that shut the entire program down for years. We could not send humans into space until we solved these problems. With the commercial industry, we're going to have multiple vehicles we can pick from. So if there is a disaster on one of these vehicles, we won't be faced with the same we have to shut everything down scenario.
Right, just like when Toyota had issues, with their accelerator, and nobody was sure what was going on or what was happening. We didn't have to stop driving all cars. We had a variety of vehicles that were at our disposal so that you could go to something else. And while we do have the Russians and we do have the Soyuz that we can go to, technically we have the Chinese we could talk to if we needed to. Nobody really wants to do that. Everybody talks about American rockets. And we want to keep Americans flying on American vehicles.
Of course.
And that's something that we're going to have a plethora of in the future. There was I was talking to some of the people in the commercial spaceflight industry earlier, and we were talking about the Winston Churchill quote that this is not the end.
Right.
This is not the beginning of the end. This is maybe the end of the beginning.
Interesting.
We've gotten the space station up and shown that we can have an international partnership and build something gigantic the size of a football field in space. We've shown how a reusable launch system could work that takes cargo and people up at the same time. And we're ready to move into the next phase. Okay, great. We've done all those things. We've done all that pathfinding work. We've prototyped a couple of different types of spaceships, and we're not really sure which way we should go. Now it's time for commercial industry to come up and take a bunch of those paths and actually walk down them all the way to completion. You know, we're going to have the Dream Chaser, and it's a lifting body vehicle. We'll have all these capsules of different designs and types that go on different types of vehicles. So I think it's the fruit is finally starting to ripen on the vine. You know, we planted all these seeds, now it's finally starting to grow up. But at some point, you've got to clear out the old before you can bring in.
There seems to be a lot of people upset with the space shuttle ending. I mean, a lot of people are very angry and saying, you know, they're saying weird things like Obama never should have canceled the space shuttle. Yep, right. These are things that I'm hearing being said, right? But Obama did not cancel the space shuttle. That was actually administration that canceled the space shuttle. But when you look at the space shuttle was designed for 100 flights each, not even close to 100 flights per shuttle. You know, they start listing off reasons like that, and I think it's. Let's talk about the 100 flights per space shuttle. Yes, it was designed for 100 flights, but they were also originally, when they were designing this thing, expecting 100 flights per year with a fleet of 4, which means 25 flights per year per space shuttle. So your 100 flights is over the course of, we'll say, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
They've been around for 25 years, way longer than what was expected when they were originally designing the space shuttles. So yeah, you're just like you can have a car that can go 100,000 miles, but if you had your car since 1960 and you haven't ever changed its oil, maybe it's not going to go so well.
Materials degrade over time. That's just the way it goes.
And we're near salt water. I mean, right on the ocean, and that stuff just comes right on in, and it starts wreaking havoc on.
Well, and somebody else can talk about materials fatigue and the fact that they go through the space shuttle with a fine-tooth comb. And the people out here, I cannot fault them. They do an amazing job, and they have done an amazing job for nearly 30 years of keeping space shuttles flying and going through them every time, pulling them apart, taking off pieces, putting new stuff on there, upgrading them constantly, making them the safest vehicles that they can be. But they're the safest that they can be. That doesn't mean that they're the safest thing you could fly.
Sure, absolutely. No launch abort system.
Right.
No launch escape system.
Right.
You know, it's a 1 in 80 chance of loss in crew and vehicle?
Something like that.
Something around those numbers. That may not be the exact number, but somewhere around that. And you talk about Dragon, where it's a 1 in 1,500 chance, I believe.
And NASA Edge in the chat room says that he still likes the old space elevator concept.
I love the space elevator concept.
It's not an old con. I mean, it's an old. They're still working on it.
Yeah, we still like the concept.
But I guess the neat thing about this, so we have a lot of people who work at NASA, and a lot of them are being laid off because the shuttle program's coming to an end.
Right.
And frankly, you never like to see your friends laid off.
No.
It's hard. It's really hard to see people lose their jobs. These are good people. These aren't slackers. These are people who loved what they did, and they felt that they were, helping their country and did everything in their power to do a great job every single day, and they did do a great job every single day. And they're being laid off, and that sucks. But that doesn't mean that the space shuttle program is what we need to keep. You look at it, we've been locked to low Earth orbit for 30 years now. We've been unable to, space shuttle cannot go to the moon. Space shuttle cannot go to Mars. It can only go to the International Space Station. And I think it's time for us to stretch our space legs again and get out there a little bit further and see what we can do.
Now, I know there are a lot of people that would say if we just gave NASA more money, they'd be able to do everything. And we could have the space station, we could have the space shuttle, and we could be developing something new. And to be honest, we've tried that. And with a government program, there's just cost creep. It's the way the government does business, the way you have to contract, the way you have to select awardees, the way you have to do technology development, the things that you have to choose to do. They spent $9 billion on Constellation.
It was essentially a paper rocket.
And they have great designs, and they have things that they've been doing out here, but it's not a rocket. It's not something that they've launched. And you look at SpaceX, wow, the rain just really started coming down. Sorry, that's super distracting, more than the bug. And they've spent $500 million, and they've launched how many? 7 rockets?
Right.
I think they've spent a little more than that. They spent under $1 billion for their entire operation. The design and implementation. They designed and built their own engines. They designed and built their Falcon 1 rocket. They flew that 5 times. They designed and built a second generation of the Merlin engines. They designed and built and flew the Falcon 9 rocket. That's where we're at. That's Constellation, $9 billion on Constellation, and Ares 1X was not an Ares rocket. No, let's remember that. Ares 5 is a paper rocket only, and it's kind of turning into SLS, or Space Launch System.
Or Senate Launch System, as people like to call it. The Senate is designing their own rocket. Now, I will admit, the Orion capsule that was being developed under Constellation is still being developed. They've got a working prototype of that. They've been doing testing on that. They've drop tested things. So there have been things done. It's not like it was just paper that they produced. And I think that Constellation did do some to push forward new technologies and at least do the groundwork of what is this rocket going to look like? What does our heavy lift launcher need to look like? But I am not a fan of the Ares 1. I've found very few people that are, other than ATK with their Liberty launch vehicle that looks strikingly like an Ares 1.
But you know what? In all fairness, they took what was kind of dropped by NASA. But this was the Obama administration that canceled Constellation. So the Bush administration canceled the Shuttle, and then the Obama administration canceled Constellation. But ATK has picked up the pieces of the Ares 1 and said, you know what? No, we're going to make this go. And we're going to build the 5-segment solid rocket booster, and we're going to turn it into the Liberty. And I think that's actually great. I think that's awesome.
I have no problem with them taking that on their own. And if ATK is convinced that that's the right way to go with it, let them go. Prove that they do have the right idea. And I think that's where, American companies can really do some of these things that the government can't always do. You know what? Congress is never going to have a consistent funding mechanism for any program, especially a technology development program like this that can falter for a couple of years and need some time to get back going. So, you know what? Let the commercial industry take it over. Maybe at the end of the day, the Liberty launch vehicle is a really great rocket and really low cost, and NASA can buy a dozen of them for $1 billion.
But just like people have said to SpaceX, great, prove it.
Yeah.
You know what? Same thing that they're saying to SpaceX, say to ATK. You know what? That's great.
Prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are, right? I'm not saying that to be. They're absolutely working on it.
Save JWST.
Save the James Webb Space Telescope?
Yeah.
Oh, why should it be saved? Oh, that's interesting. So there's been talk lately that the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope.
In some ways.
In some ways. Well, in that it's a great observatory that will be out in space, and it will be looking farther than Hubble could in different frequency ranges than what Hubble could.
Woefully over budget and way behind schedule.
Yes.
Yep.
And again, like Constellation, okay, some of these technologies were not as mature as NASA thought that they were, or the manufacturing processes weren't quite as streamlined as NASA thought that they were. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand is when you cut budgets as well. So if the budget gets cut for it, you have a 10-year budget and you have $100 million you're going to spend each year, and you cut that down to $80 million. That doesn't mean that you take that 20 each year and add it to the end. You add that plus 50%, because now you're only working on this project part-time, but you still have a desk.
Gotcha.
We still have to pay your benefits. We still have to pay you full-time or find something else for you to work on.
Right.
We still have to pay the bills for the building. We still have to pay the water, like all those baseline costs are still there. So it doesn't actually save any money to spread it out. It costs you lots more money. So every time this thing is extended by 5 years or 10 years, you have to say, well, we already built this part and we've been having it in storage. Now we need to take it out of storage, make sure it's still good, and put it back in storage.
Interesting. Chat room is saying, well, somebody in the chat room is saying that there's no more money that's being spent on the shuttle, so why cut Webb? Because now there's more money available.
Well, because the budget for NASA doesn't go up. I mean, right?
Right, but
I don't know. I haven't looked at all the numbers.
What they're saying is, that this money isn't being spent on the shuttles. Just slide over to JWST.
Well, but remember, NASA is going to have the Senate Launch System to deal with here shortly.
Well,
I'm sorry,
I'm aware of that.
System.
Which is the heavy lift rockets that the Senate thinks we need to go ahead and start building to reach other destinations.
The only problem I really have with SLS is that if Senate wants NASA to build a rocket, and they want them to have their very own rocket they can call their own, that's fine, but the senators should stop playing rocket scientists. They should stop saying, you can build a rocket, but it must use this type of fuel, and it must use this type of thing. You know what? Let the rocket scientists determine what type of fuel it should use.
But the senators are working from what their constituents want. And if you have constituents that are in a specific state that produces those fuels, that's what they want you advocating for.
Great, but that doesn't make for a great... Here's the problem, and I understand that. But let's just say you do that. You end up with a program like Constellation where it costs an insane amount of money and the technology is not that great. And what they have to do is they have to jimmy rig all this stuff into a rocket. And you don't end up with this sleek, streamlined rocket like with what SpaceX has. You end up with this monstrosity of a beast that's extremely expensive, and you just can't afford to run it. So now instead of saving those jobs, you put them all in jeopardy because you have to cut the program. And it never even got off the ground. So you have nothing to show for it. People go, what have you done? They yell at NASA. It's not NASA's fault at all. And no one's jobs have actually been saved. The best way to serve their constituents is to let the rocket scientists be rocket scientists and say, you know what, maybe solid fuel is the best technology, but we're going to use it the way we want to use it. We're going to use it where we want to use it. All right, that's my soapbox.
No, and I completely, I agree with you from a technical standpoint. And the technical side of my head says, you are absolutely right. You need to let technical people make technical decisions. But the political piece doesn't always work that way. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. That I've been in congressional offices and they'll look me right in the face and say, I don't care about national issues. My main concern is the people that are directly in my district. If you are inside my lines, I'm listening to what you want. If you're inside my state, I'm listening to what you want. Region, okay. And then when it gets to be a national issue, everything's a national issue. So who cares? Global issues? Come on, please. Global issue? Who cares?
And that makes sense, but they have to look beyond it doesn't even have to be a national issue. They just have to look beyond the short-term re-election cycle. And that's where it's going to get very difficult.
But I think you would have to back that up and say voters need to look beyond the short-term election cycle and be able to understand it. Maybe that's that we haven't done a good enough job of explaining how this works.
Oh, no, we absolutely have not. I think a lot of the fault falls onto us, the tweeple, the media, people who are explaining what's going on in the space industry. I guarantee you, if you go and you start watching some of the traditional media, they're going to start saying the space program is dead. We can't send humans into space ever again. I mean, it's the amount of misinformation that will be spread over the coming 24 to 72 hours is going to be astronomically high. And that's absolutely our fault, too.
It is. Well, it's our fault, but there's something we can do about it. I mean, we're here doing this now. We have all the people in the chat room, all the people that are here. I say we go guerrilla and just start busting in on other people's broadcasts and telling them, and they go, "This is the end of human spaceflight."
We kind of have.
No, it is not.
We have to a certain extent. Did you want to talk about that at all? About how we're being rebroadcast?
Well, yeah, and not yet.
Okay.
I haven't seen it go live yet. Well, all right, we'll talk about it really quick. I believe This Week in Tech and This Week in Tech Live will be rebroadcasting Spacevidcast sometime either now or soon for the live coverage of the space shuttle launch. And it is our goal to provide everyone, of course, with the best launch coverage on the face of the planet, but with good factual information about what's coming. And we are not a breaking news site, and we are not a let's scare you with news type site and make you run out and talk about what you saw here. We're about giving you the right information and allowing you to make informed decisions. And we'll have some people on that we'll be able to debate some of this stuff with. We'll have some people on that we don't agree with their opinion on. And that's okay. But I think it will be a fantastic show, and you're going to see all the hubbub going on behind us because it's just going to be epic.
There's so much media.
There's so much media
here.
And they're here because it's a big deal, and because I think the story has gotten out that this is the end of space. We got to be there to cover the end of space because it's going to be a tragedy. And it's going to be like big, scary graphics on the screen.
Oh,
dun, dun, dun. It's going to be horrific.
Space is dead.
Right, yeah. And that's why they're all here. But I think that you could easily turn that around and say, this is the dawn of a new era. This is where spaceflight takes off and becomes accessible to the common person.
You heard me say this in 2010. I used the term tipping point.
Yeah.
Because 2010 is when I actually thought the space shuttle would retire. It was when it was originally supposed to retire. But it ended up being this is the moment in time. This if you need to point to an exact moment in time, this is it. The final launch of the space shuttle. This is our tipping point. This is when we can make a choice. Do we choose to move forward with things that we can't afford, making bad decisions that are short-sighted and short-term, or do we choose to say, you know what? Let's try something new. We've been locked to low Earth orbit. That hasn't worked so well for us. Let's see what else we can do. Let's see how far we can push humanity. And the idealist in me wants to say that's what we're going to do. The realist in me says, realistically, it will actually be a combination of both. And I think that's okay. I don't think you can just do radical change all at once. I think we need to slowly slide in to this commercial market. And I do believe they have to prove themselves.
I agree. And they will be having to prove themselves. I know that the FAA and the range and NASA all have different requirements that they're going to force these companies to comply with before they're going to let them even launch. I mean, the amount of hoops. I was just at a SpaceX reception looking at the flown Dragon capsule, which is super cool. Anything that's been to space is kind of neat, but when you see a capsule that could one day hold people,
it's burned,
and
it's like charred on the side, yeah.
And you're within spitting distance.
I could have touched it.
Actually, well, can you talk about that a little? I mean, finish your point, but then I want to talk to you about that space.
Yeah. Well, so we're there, and we're just having a reception with SpaceX in the Air Force Space and Missile History Center, and I was talking with someone from SpaceX about all the trials and hoops that they had to jump through, and they said, oh yeah, it was difficult, it was hard, it was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be to get all of these certifications. And some people would take that and go, see, those commercial people, it's so much harder than they think it's going to be. They're not going to be able to do it cheap, they're not going to be able to do it like this. And for me, I took that as they're learning.
Yeah.
This is a learning curve that everybody's going to have to go through. It's always a little bit harder than you think it is, but if you start off with a lot of energy and momentum and you do things right from the beginning, and you know what, they still launched. They still made it through all those hoops. They still managed to check all the boxes off. So that means all the other companies can do that too. Now, when we start doing people, it's a little bit different ball game, right?
But they're designing it with people in mind from the beginning.
Yeah.
So we had a chance to tour Slick 40, Space Launch Complex 40, which is where SpaceX launches from here at the Kennedy Space Center. And it was the first time I had ever been there. And I have been down to pad 39A, which is where we're going to launch the space shuttle from, and it's a completely different type of pad. And the thing that struck me, which was you don't think of this thing. So they have 4 lightning towers on the launch pad, and you can see those lightning towers from here at the press site. But what you can't see are the cables that interconnect all of the lightning towers, right? So they've got these metal cables that kind of do these brackets and these X's and this. But the cables go above it as well and make this square shape, and they kind of come in and make this inner square shape. So when you look up, you realize the amount of room that they have to launch the Dragon in.
Yeah, we stood there and we were looking at it, and I think it was Pete who said, it really is like threading a needle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, it is, because it hits one of those wires, and you're just going to have badness all over the place.
Yeah.
It's wide enough for the rocket, and it's wide enough for a little wobble in the rocket. But not
and
more
that's
than...
it.
Yeah.
That's
it is a lot narrower than you would expect it to be. And it's impressive. And, I mean, they're not the only ones, right? Most of the launch pads out there had some sort of, when we're driving past them, as you got closer, you could kind of see the wire for all of the... It's basically, so you can ground everything. And, but you could see all the infrastructure. And it was like, wow, they all have to do this. What else is really interesting is to see the different mentalities behind the different companies launching these rockets. Some of them have rockets that roll out. Some of them have rockets that they put up and then they roll the building away from the rocket. Some of them, like here, they kind of roll the rocket out and then roll the building around the rocket and then roll the right. So all these different ways of going about essentially the same thing, and not one of them is right or wrong. It's just different ways of solving the same issue.
And with the shuttle program, they were actually doing all of those. So they would take the individual booster segments, and they would bring them in, and they would stack them all up together. And then they would bring the mobile launch platform in and stick it down and stick the booster segments on it, and then bring the tank over and stick it on there. Well, they would float the tank into KSC, then raise it up, stick it on there. And then they would take the shuttle, and they would roll it over from the OPF, and then they would raise it up, and then they would stick it on there. So then they've raised and stuck everything on the pad. Now they pick up the mobile launcher, and then they take it all the way out to the pad. Let's do it this way. And then they put the rotating service structure around it, and then bring out the payload and stick it into the shuttle.
Then they rotate the structure back. I mean,
then take the crawler out from underneath it, and then, so if you can imagine all of the things that they did for the unmanned vehicles, they were doing for the shuttle together.
All combined. All combined. That's part of what leads to the inefficiencies of the shuttle, I think, is that it is an inefficient vehicle. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. I love the shuttle. I'm not trying to rail on the shuttle. I grew up with the shuttle. I didn't grow up with Apollo. I mean, I absolutely adore the shuttle. But there's nothing like being able to look, and I'm not trying to taunt people, but I just look right over there, right past the light, and you can kind of see it glimmering. You can kind of just see it shining in the night with the lights with the lights hitting it, and you're like, Apollo rocket looked really cool on the pad too.
Oh, yeah.
But there is something just majestic and beautiful about a winged vehicle pointing towards the sky, and you're like, in 9 minutes that'll be in space with 7 people on board. Well, 4 in this case.
Quantum will be hanging out for a while.
Well, and if you think about that, when steam engines first came along, and that was the marvel of modern technology, and people would go out to watch a train come through town because it was such a huge piece of equipment, and it did something so miraculous going so fast, you know, and that was the pinnacle of modern technology. And I'm sure when they moved on to coal power, you know, or to electric trains and went to bullet trains, and you know, people said, oh, that's ugly, that's not as good as what we've had. You know, what about these Boilermakers? They work hard, they really do their job well. Why do we have to move on from this? It just works. Technology progresses, things move on. You got to constantly be looking for what's next.
Change can be good. Change can be great.
Change doesn't have to be good. Change could be terrible. Maybe none of these commercial launch providers can do anything. In 10 years from now, NASA says, oh, this is horrific. We're going back to doing our own rockets because you guys aren't ready. We thought you were ripe and ready. You're not. I mean, that's a possible future, right?
It is unlikely, but possible.
I don't think it's likely, but it is possible. But again, I think just like trains, people will get used to it, and they'll get used to seeing them regularly. And now you just see a train, and it takes you a place.
You know, and what's ironic about that is the Space Shuttle was the vehicle that was supposed to make space commonplace for everyone. I mean, it was supposed to launch so often and drive the cost of space down so far that it was just this revolutionary new device. And it actually ended up doing the exact opposite of that. I mean, it's still a beautiful, majestic vehicle, and I'm going to be sad to see it go. And we were talking about this earlier, where we're going to miss coming down here. These events are fun, and we like hanging out with you guys in the chat. I mean, seriously, we got this. It's just awesome.
And, you know, it's not like this is the end. And I think that's the big thing to tell people.
It's a new beginning.
It's a new beginning. We won't have shuttle launches to come down here for, but we'll have something. Something will be launching off of Pad A and Pad B. 39A and B are not going away. Something else will launch from them one day. There are still going to be SpaceX launches. There are going to be Boeing launches and Delta launch, and Lockheed launches. ULA is still going to launch things. We've got new people that are coming out. Maston was around here, you know, and they're getting ready to do some test flights in the coming year. So new things are coming that are going to be amazing down here. And
but as Witty 4420 says, change is scary. Or it said scary.
Well, and Cregan99 says change is needed.
It's both.
There you go.
Have you ever read Who Moved My Cheese?
No.
Have you guys ever read this
book?
It is a phenomenal book. It's a very quick read. If you want to go to the bookstore, you can just sit down like in a Barnes & Noble and skim through it in about 20 minutes. Right. And then just put it back on the shelf if you can't afford it. And I heard that they were actually giving them out to some of the people down here, because the whole book is about, you can be a person that is locked into one way of doing things and constantly complaining if things change, or you can be a person that's constantly looking to improve what you're doing. Where is some place that we can make a good improvement on what's going on right now? How do I move forward? How do I get ready for the next thing? And the baseline of the story is there are mice that are always used to getting cheese from a certain place. Some mice will just go to that place and never go anywhere else. And if the cheese stops being there, what do? They don't know any place else to go. There are other mice that are constantly exploring the maze to find out if there's other cheese other places. And while it may seem stupid, why do you go other places? The cheese is where the cheese always is. At some point, if there is no more cheese there, they know where to go look. They know how to go look other places.
Right.
Even if they're, you know, it takes them a while to find it, at least they're explorers and they're well-versed in exploration and to go out and try new things. And that, I think, is part of the thing here. People have gotten so locked into the shuttle after so many decades of doing it, and this is the only thing they've been doing, and this is what they do so good, and they're so wrapped up in it.
It's all we know. It is. It's all we know.
I know, but you gotta
look for new.
You gotta leave the nest at some point, and I think this is people's safety net. This is their nest, and we gotta. Okay, we've done this. We've done it well. It's been fantastic. It's time to go. We've had 7 years to prepare for this day. We knew in 2004 that this was coming. And as much as people have fought it and pushed it back and added extra flights and said, wait, we didn't really mean it.
It is what it is.
We knew this was coming.
Let's do this. Let's attempt to take a break. I'm going to find out if there's actually a commercial object in the timeline in a mere moment. But let's take a quick break. And when we come back, what I'd like to talk about is the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. You said there was some cool stuff going on there. And I do want to talk about your, you didn't go to Slick 40, you saw the Dragon at the, I want to talk about what you saw there as well. So, I'm going to look foolish in a moment, or this is going to work great. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Absolutely fantastic comment in the chat room.
That was amazing. I love it. I love it so much. Quantum said it.
Quantum said it?
And SpaceX knows about cheese.
Yeah, well, they know how to make cheese moves, certainly.
There you go.
So for those who don't know, SpaceX, on the first time they flew Dragon, which is the spacecraft they have to bring cargo and eventually humans to the International Space Station and beyond, by the way. It could theoretically go further than that. It could theoretically go to the moon or onto Mars. It's got the heat shields capable of doing one of those re-entries back to Earth. The first thing they brought up into space was a big thing of cheese, which, if I understand correctly, they actually did carve up and serve in Hawthorne in their headquarters in California. I don't know if I'm pretty sure that's true. It's truth.
Apparently, Tim didn't hear that. I heard that as well.
I heard it, yeah.
So, okay. You're not crazy.
Zach hadn't heard that. Am I crazy, guys? But anyhow. Let's first talk about, since we're already in SpaceX, you did the tour of the Dragon tonight.
I did.
So tell me what that was like.
Well, it was actually in a test very similar to this one. The Spaceflight Dragon capsule out there, it's been touring around to different conferences, so it was at the National Space Symposium. They've had it out here for several press events.
It was in D.C., right? For a while?
It was in D.C. They actually did unveiling. So they did a joint Tesla Motors, which is Elon Musk's one of his other ventures.
Yep.
That's doing a total electric car. And much like SpaceX, it's the hot and sexy way to change the world.
Did they have a Tesla S there or a Tesla Roadster, do you know?
It was a Tesla Roadster.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure, because that's all they have so far. They don't have the S out.
They have the S in alpha form on the road. Obviously, you can't buy it, but they do have some on the road in alpha form. And they call it the Tesla S Alpha, which I think is awesome. The next one that comes out is called the Beta. Yeah.
Very nice. Well, the S is going to be their sedan model, which is what everyone could afford to buy. So it starts at 60.
Oh,
it starts at 60?
It goes 70 and then 80 depending upon. The reason I know this is I'm eager to pick up a Tesla.
He's looking at one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's $60,000 for the 100-mile version.
In that
$70,000.
stupid green.
No.
No?
No, that's the Roadster.
Oh, okay.
It's $70,000 for the 200-mile version, and it's $80,000 for the 300-mile version.
Okay.
And it's got the most amazing center console in the world. It's like this huge touch screen. It's like, I swear to you,
you just want it for the tech, don't you?
I absolutely want it for the tech. Absolutely, that's why I want this car. Yep.
So
I don't care that it's green. I like the tech.
And that's part of what they were doing it for. And I know I've heard that part of Tesla's reason for coming out with the fastest production sports car ever was because they wanted to make the technology sexy. Everybody hears electric vehicle and they think, I'm driving a Prius at 35 miles an hour. And they wanted to show that an electric vehicle could be sexy. Yep. When you think of rockets, I mean, the Space Shuttle is kind of sexy, but when you think of a Delta 4,
very sexy.
An Atlas V, that doesn't sound like a sexy rocket. But when you see a Falcon rocket take off and the marketing and the branding they've been doing, Virgin Galactic does a really good job with their branding.
Great job. Yep.
They make spaceflight look sexy. So that was Tesla Motors. Let's make it look sexy. And how do we do that? By bringing friggin' spaceships in with it. So they had a joint event at the new Tesla Motors showroom in D.C. where they brought the Space Flown Dragon in and cross-pollinated all of those reporters.
Nice.
So you had car industry people looking at spaceships, spaceship people looking at cars and saying, there's a lot of crossover here. I mean, we're talking lithium batteries, right? And electric engines and the same sort of things.
Wait, you're saying words I understand? Oh my goodness, no way!
Actually, that is a brilliant marketing move, because I would love, one of our things is to get space more in the forefront of in front of
Common people.
Common people. But no, get it in front of.
Wow.
I think
Minnesota Young Black Pro is really going to have a heyday with that one.
I think most people are interested in space travel. It's built into our DNA, the urge to explore and move above and beyond where we're at. And while yes, change is not easy, and some people like to just always go to the same place for the cheese. I love that. Most people are excited about this stuff, and they want to be excited about this stuff, but passively excited.
Right.
They need a gateway.
Yep.
You need a gateway drug, and for some people that's going to be different things. That's why you got to branch out and try some different stuff. For some people, science cheerleaders are going to be their great gateway drug.
Yep. That's a real thing, by the way.
Oh yeah, science cheerleaders are totally real. They're women who have been professional cheerleaders.
Thank you. I was going to say, because I didn't understand. I thought it was a bunch of women who decided to be cheerleaders for science and actually do rah-rah-ree cheers. No. These are professional or previously professional cheerleaders, like Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all know what I'm talking about, because I know not just regular cheerleaders, but Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders.
All the guys are going, yeah, no, we know. I think everyone here is nodding their head.
Who also happen to have a science degree.
Mm-hmm.
So they're microbiologists.
So they're not like, yay, go Newtons. They actually know what they're talking about. So it's impressive. Very impressive. Go on.
And the point was, they got together and said, we're cheerleaders, and that has a certain image associated with it.
Right.
And we're perfectly comfortable being cheerleaders, and we're perfectly comfortable doing science. We're nurses. We're microbiologists. We're economists. And we have brains too, and they're really good, and we can do both. And why should there be a stigma?
And they can do the splits.
Yeah. Split the atom. That's going to be the quote of the show, right?
That you know what? Twitterverse, that needs to be tweeted out right now.
I'm not sure how you spell that, though.
WAHHHHHHH.
Oh my gosh. Science cheerleaders are going to come after me. But the point of them doing all this stuff is to show that there are more than one way to get people interested in science, and there's more than one gateway. Girls can watch them and say, wow, I can be pretty and a scientist. Never really considered that before, Or guys can look at them and say, wow, those hot chicks aren't just hot, they're actually smart about science stuff too. Holy crap, So, here we are. We've got this cool Dragon capsule. It's space flown. I'm getting to show my 2-year-old something that's been in space, and not like space way over there behind a glass wall, or not a historical artifact.
You can walk up to it like you
this
can
was
walk
in space
up to it
this year, and I can just go up to it and look at it. They pulled panels off of it so you could see down inside there. They had diagrams of this is how the main chutes deploy, and here's the drogue chute area, and if you were inside, this is what you would see, and you can see the porthole on it so that you can look out. The charring up the side, which is, if you ever go and have seen a Mercury or Apollo or Gemini capsule, that's exactly what it looks like. You've got that heat shield that slams into the atmosphere, and then you've got pieces of that'll kind of streak up the side. It's designed to burn away, and then you replace it after a flight. And it's so amazing.
You don't replace it after. You don't reuse the capsule.
No.
They're not going to reuse those capsules?
So they may, but traditionally you don't replace it after a flight.
Okay.
Right now, actually,
I'm 10 years in the future right now.
Well, let me pause you so that we actually talked to SpaceX about that in our tour group, because we took a different tour, and
we took the media tour.
We took a media tour,
not the food tour.
We didn't get free alcohol, Tim.
The luncheon tour, whatever it was you were on.
Someone asked about reusability, and SpaceX said, yes, our long-term goal is to make this reusable, but that's not going to happen right now.
Right.
Yeah. So in the future, it may become reusable, but right now, don't expect SpaceX to be, because they want to recover their first stage, which is the initial big, huge rocket segment. They want to recover basically all of it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's, so again, I'm talking 10 years in the future, that they would be able to take that heat shield off, replace it, do some refurb work, and put it back up again. But right now they're not concerned with doing reusability. They're concerned with reliability and getting it up there reliably and bringing it back reliably, which they've already shown that they could do. And for this to be their very first capsule that they've ever flown, and for it to be able to go up, achieve orbit, come back in, do a re-entry,
and land like pinpoint precision.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then that they can just like pick it up and take it around the country. They don't treat it like it's a
relic-y.
There's something about the Space Shuttle program where everything is off limits.
Yeah.
And when you come out and there's artifacts that are like historical artifacts, and they're all behind glass. And then there's live artifacts that are actually things going on, and they're kind of far away. You can't get to them without a badge, and then somebody has to, screen you and take your blood.
The closest this is 3 miles, and we have badges for that.
Right. Well, even the rollout that we got to go to, and we got to see, super cool. But at the same time, armed security guards, stand back.
Right.
You
Please
have
don't
an
touch
area.
that.
Right.
Please don't touch that. Come back over here. Don't go too far. Yeah.
And as it's moving along, they're moving you along and stuff. It's very controlled. And this was very much, they had some stanchions up around it that had stuff on it and said, please don't touch it. But otherwise, you're right there with it. I mean, you could just go and poke it, for Pete's sakes. I had to keep control of my 2-year-old, or she would have run over and jumped inside the Dragon capsule. And how cool is that it is that commonplace for SpaceX, that they can just have a Dragon capsule and cart it all over the country and let people check it out and say, this is what you might ride in one day.
Did you point at it and go, wow?
Wow.
No, she pointed at it and went, walked it.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah, we got it. Spaceship. We've been teaching her all these good words. So when she was inside the museum, she was pointing around at all the rockets on the wall.
Rockets.
Did you get any of that on tape?
I don't think we did. Although she did trip and fall into a rocket, so she had a big rocket mark on her head.
Oh, you hit your head on a rocket.
But we're like, how cool is that? That she has like, oh, what's that bruise from? Or it was a rocket.
It was a rocket. Yeah, that goes.
How many other parents get to say that kind of stuff at daycare?
Wow.
She also had a bookmark on her at one point where a kid threw a book at her, which we were upset about, but at the same time, they're learning. They're sharing books. So
There you go.
like, that's fine.
Let's talk about the visitor center for a moment, because there's some cool stuff going on there.
There is a lot of cool stuff going on at the visitor center. So it's madhouse here right now because of launch. But if you come back a little bit later in the summer, they're doing a whole sci-fi summer this year. So they have
science
and
like
fiction. Right.
Science fiction.
Right.
Science fiction. That's my glasses, nerd guy.
Oh, sorry. I have to put my nerd glasses back on. Hello?
Hello.
It's wonderful. No, but because it's here at Kennedy Space Center, it's a little bit cooler than regular science fiction. It's not like you're going to the science fiction at the library down the street or something. No offense, libraries, love you guys. But you've got real rockets here along with the inspiration for them.
Right.
So they've got Star Trek The Experience with a whole bunch of the memorabilia that was in the shows. You can go and see engineering, where Geordie LaForge was sitting around reconfiguring power couplings and, depolarizing stuff.
It's too bad LeVar Burton didn't come back
Oh
for
my
this
gosh, I know,
Could
right?
you imagine?
Will Wheaton and LeVar Burton in
Right?
engineering, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a nerdgasm right there.
Exactly. So, and along with the original series, you could sit in Captain Kirk's chair, do some of that cool stuff. They've got a whole stage show that they do that's all about science, but it's with Star Trek. So it's Star Trek Live, and they have people that are, isn't that neat?
It is.
Have you gone and seen it yet?
No, I hadn't even heard about
Oh
it.
my gosh! So it's geared towards little kids a little bit.
Oh, that really is my reaction, by the way.
We're all a little kid at heart. We're all a little kid at heart. Actually, when it first opened, I believe Jason went and did an interview with some of those people. So check back through the archives, and you can find some of the stuff when they first opened. They've improved it a little bit since then. And now that they've got all the cool stuff there, it's really an experience to go and see it all. They've got some space toys, like historical stuff that's been out. They've got Transformers 3. That's part
IMAX
of
3D right now?
In IMAX 3D.
Awesome.
So you can actually be here and go like,
Right
that's
over
where they filmed it, and that's the shuttle they used, and this, oh my god, and Transformers were here. It's really cool. And now they've also got a Lego exhibit, and I heard that today they were presenting Bob Cabana, the director of Kennedy Space Center, with a Lego shuttle.
Oh.
I want one.
Which is super awesome, by the way. Yeah, and to commemorate that, there's a big Lego exhibit going on here, and Lego's partnership with NASA, and so so let's see, we have Transformers, Star Trek, and Legos at Kennedy Space Center where people and cool things launch into space.
Oh, you know what else is coming up?
Also, we're here. Did you notice that?
And we're here. You know what else is coming up at Kennedy Space Center at the visitor complex? Cap, we have pictures of this. They are getting the shuttle that's about to launch. So when they retire Space Shuttle Atlantis, they have got the most amazing architectural designs for this. Check. So I have no idea, Cap, what they're called, but if you look somewhere in the timeline,
super cool
somewhere in the
picture.
launch, it's in the launch show timeline. There you go. That's what it is.
Oh, good boy, Adam.
That's what it's going to look like. They're going to tip it on its side, right, and you're going to be able to kind of walk. Much like you were saying, you're not allowed to touch, right? So it's always a little bit away, but still, it's just going to look at how amazing that's going to be, and that's going to be right here at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. It's going to take them a couple of years to build that, so it's not like it's going to land and all of a sudden go on the thing. But you know, this is something you're going to be able to look to, and I think it's going to be one of those inspirational moments because they've got one here, they've got one going to California, and they've got one going to New York, and they've got one going to
Smithsonian in
DC. There's another shot of it, so you'll kind of see what it looks like. They'll have the cargo bay doors open.
But yeah, Atlantis is the one that's coming to the Kennedy Space Center, and as Andrea Farmer has said before, they want her dirty. They don't want her cleaned up. They don't want her too pretty. They want her, you know, exactly the way, or as close to the way as she would be when she comes home from space.
And by the way, you look at these pictures, and the orbiter looks nice and clean and white. I can tell you from seeing it roll over from the orbital facility.
That's not what she looks like.
Oh my goodness, Atlantis is dirty.
Dirty bird.
Well, imagine you have a 30-year-old car. No matter how much you keep it up, it's probably, unless you are really crazy about making it shine at all times, it's just going to get dirty.
Yeah. You know, I'm not complaining. It has its space wear. Atlantis has clearly gone to space before and come back a number of times, and you can see it in the white heat shields on the top, not the black heat shield on the bottom, but in the white side of the orbiter, you can just see like slight scorch marks.
The white side.
Yeah.
Well, even on the bottom, you can see some scorching going on. I'm sure that they'll leave the little pits that are there because the tiles aren't perfect. They do come back with slight pits in them, and there is allowable tolerance for that it can be slightly pitted. Now, one of the things that I love is that this will be one of the only orbiters that you get to see it opened up. I mean, when you go to the Udvar Hazy Center at the Smithsonian, which is in DC but out at the Dulles Airport, where they've got room to put these things.
Because it's big.
Holy cow, that's a huge moth on your head. All right. Mothra came to visit. That's how important the show is. Mothra came. But it's all closed up, so you've got a space shuttle that looks like it was it just rolled in there like an aircraft, you know, and set in. But that's not its primary function.
Right.
It's not primarily an aircraft. It's not an aircraft at all. It's a glider. And it's not supposed to be rolling along. It's supposed to be open, doing space work. Right. This is a really cool opportunity. They finish this extension to the visitor center to see it in all of its glory, the way that it would be out in space, the way that.
So I think at this point, so we've got, for those who don't know, this is our stream-a-thon. We're going to be going until we either scrub or we launch.
Or they evacuate us because of weather.
One of them. And we will be the last to leave the site.
Yes, we will.
So why don't we do this? Let's wrap up this show, and we'll archive it. We'll post it online, because this was an official Spacevidcast 418 live from...
Woo!
All right. Another one in the can.
Eiffel Tower.
That's awkward. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching. Hopefully, for those of you watching live, you'll stick around for our live coverage of Space Shuttle Atlantis, the final flight of the Space Shuttle. Otherwise, if you're watching this on demand, go back. I'm sure we'll have an archive version of this. And what's really cool about Spacevidcast coverage, something that I don't think anyone else does, these graphics at the bottom of the screen. So you'll see there's the T-minus clock, which is the official clock, and that starts and stops. The L-minus clock, for those of you watching live, we'll describe that in a little bit. And then right over here, where we've got these at, a new bar slides out. It will actually give you vehicle information as it's launching. So you're going to see speed, you're going to see G-forces, you're going to see altitude, you're going to see a bunch of different information update in real time. It's like all these numbers start sliding by. It's really cool. So, you know, and we'll have that archive for you as well. So check that out. Go to the Spacevidcast YouTube channel and search for STS-135. And I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching. I'd also like to thank Crow River Coffee Company, who is hosting this right now back in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So thank you, Caffeinated. Buy some Blast Off Blend coffee for you coffee lovers out there. And we'll see you guys in just a few more minutes when we come back with our continuing coverage of the final flight of America's Space Shuttle.
Woot!